her choices were really clear and I supported them. But when I asked her, kind of saying, like, what would you say to people when they might say you gave up your will to live or you gave up? And she said, I'm choosing life either way.
Yeah.
And to me, that is exactly what you're touching on, is that like she knew as a soul that she wasn't choosing death. She was like, she knew the body would die, but she was choosing life either way.
When you can make peace with death before you die, you can really fully live because there's one
Mhm.
less thing to be afraid of.
Right. It's a big one, it's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fear of death it's a huge elephant in the room most of the time. That
Mhm.
if we avoid it, we don't fully allow ourselves to live because that fear covers everything, right?
You had said completion, but the acknowledgement of the graduation of like, wow, okay, I might not want her to leave her body. She might not want to leave right now. And also being like, well, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And we both knew that it was the next step in her path. And to me, that is what made all the difference.
Oh, hello, and welcome to the Higher Vibe. I'm your host, Jean Roorda. I'm having conversations with psychic friends, and today I have with me Jen Mathews. She's a dear friend, spiritual cheerleader, facilitator, and TEDx speaker. Hello, and welcome, Jen.
Hello.
It's
Happy to
so good
see
to
you.
have you here.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yay.
I'm going to try not to have a total permagrin on my face just because I'm super happy to see you.
You too.
We don't get to see each other very often, so when we do, it's one of those tail wagging experiences for us. I'm so delighted. Oh, so Jen, I'm also delighted because the topic we're going to talk about today, death and dying, is I think so important and often maybe still one of those taboo topics. I think a lot less so now, would you say, than maybe in our parents' generation?
Oh,
But
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, it's still one of those topics that even though it happens to all of us, we all die, we all experience our loved ones dying. It's still one of those topics that people tiptoe around, or maybe it just brings up so much pain and grief that it tends to be avoided. And it's just so important for us to embrace death as a part of life, a part of our human
Mhm.
experience, and to really dive into it with all 4 feet. My dog analogies are coming up. Just, to really face it head on and really look at it before it's in our face, to really consider death as a part of life before we're kind of at death's doorway or before we have a loved one that's about to pass or have a loved one that
Mhm.
passes, suddenly or something. So it's so good to bring it into our awareness and to really look at what makes us avoid that topic or just what comes up for us when we think about death and what kind of fear, what kind of grief, what kind of just resistance or all the
Mhm.
feels. I feel like death brings up all the
Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
because when we think about loved ones passing, we also get to treasure who they are to us, who they were, and
Mhm.
that can bring up all the joy. And then we also experience, of course, the loss. So, the reason we're talking about this today, of course, is that Jen has a profound experience, I think, of death and dying in your lifetime. And I won't say too much
Mhm.
about it, I'll let you talk about it.
Mhm.
But I love your story, and I love that I got to know the loved one that you experienced passing before she passed.
Mhm.
And just love both of you so much. So, yeah,
Mhm.
tell us about.
Thanks.
Yeah. Tell us about your experience, and there's so much you could say about what you learned from it, but just to start out with, who did you lose in your life and what did she mean to you in
Hmm.
that whole process?
Yeah. Well, thank you. And before I say that, I just want to say something really important. I feel like you said was
Yeah,
to address death and dying before we
yeah,
necessarily have experiences. Like so few people do that. So I love that you said that because even if someone hasn't experienced a significant loss in their life, like to actually do the work on it and to think about it and to look at your perspectives on it beforehand, it's like, wouldn't our world be different, So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
so anyway, thank you for saying that. And
Exactly.
actually, that's a good segue to talking about my experience. I feel like I had the opportunity in many ways to think about death before the death of my life partner. So it was my life partner who had died. 8 years before that, my mom had died, and I was only 31 then. and other people in life, and all of my grandparents lived till their 90s, so I knew them, my great grandparents, and then her
Wow.
friends. But
Yeah.
when my partner Kate had been diagnosed, I wasn't sure what it would be like because I had had previous experiences. And meanwhile, since my mom had died, I had started my spiritual path in a different kind of way. Like I grew up Catholic, so I
Yeah.
had these ideas of the afterlife and of eternal life and all of that from Catholicism, but they
Yeah.
were very different than what I evolved into in my teenage years and after that, or like energy healing and Reiki work, and then
Yeah.
continuing my path. So definitely having that background
Yeah.
was significant in how I was able to integrate Kate's diagnosis and
Yeah.
dying process. So yeah, we were in a great place in our lives and on a similar spiritual path. And then her diagnosis, she had had cancer many years before, prior. So I think that was one of the ways of confronting it is when we first got together as a couple, there was an acknowledgement of who knows, right? Like who knows, but who knows what'll happen to any of us, as you say.
Right. We always never know when
Who knows?
when death will greet us. But there was that
Yeah.
previous diagnosis and recovery, so it was like that possibility was on the table. It wasn't a
Right.
surprise.
And I think you think about it differently because she had had an experience as a young person in her late teens, early 20s of being very close to the physical death and then sticking around. And
Yeah.
so to her, it was all these bonus years, but then there was more of an awareness, I think, of the joy of life and the preciousness of being in a human body
Yeah.
was really, really present. So I feel like that created some kind of foundation. And when you say like who was she to me aside from being a life partner,
Yeah.
one of the things and the joys that you and I share and Kate shared is
Yeah.
doing laughter and laughter yoga and all
Yeah.
that. So in that process of both learning how to teach laughter to people and studying with a spiritual teacher who was very much about laughter,
Yeah.
it made it really interesting because then we both had to really look at like how do we face death in a way that's very real, that doesn't use laughter as an escape or as an avoidance, but actually as a way to release energy and to just to let go of certain preconceptions and assumptions and to be grateful and have fun in
Yeah.
the time we knew that we had. So
Yeah.
once she was diagnosed, she died 12 weeks later. So it was a short time and yet enough time to have some of the connecting and communications with each other and with our friends and family
Absolutely. Yeah.
that we wanted to have and needed to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say you both did it so well.
Oh, thank you.
No,
Thank
because
you.
she really did have those. I think both of you kind of knew, right? Is that
Mhm.
correct to say when you got the diagnosis, there was a sense of maybe, well, it's possible she'll make it, she'll recover, but there was a sense of this looks like a completion. And she did, she pulled aside all of her friends. She pulled me aside at
Mhm.
the last gathering we were at together, brought me in the van and just
Mhm.
it was such an honoring and a goodbye. She just honored like our friendship and all the things,
Mhm.
that she loved about me and I got to share all the things I loved about her and she had a little gift for me that I still have, a beautiful stone and it was just
Mhm.
so well done, just so present with the
Mhm.
process, not in any kind of denial or avoidance, but just
Mhm.
present with it with the whole range of emotions, but so much joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things I think for her was that she loved, even though it was challenging for her in certain ways to be human in a body,
Yeah.
not just with cancer things, but just the world is a wacky place. For sensitive people like us, it's an
Yes.
extra wacky place. So there was that challenge, but there
Yeah.
was so much embracing of the world and the joys and nature and hikes and connection with friends and laughter and just so much of that is what brought her to really want to be here and stick around.
Yeah.
So like that part was really clear. And at the same time, we did know right away. I mean, like you said, was there a hope? And I think there was always well, you never know, right? Like miracles happen, who knows?
Anything's
But
possible. Yeah.
we were clear right away that like
Yeah.
this was her time and
Yeah.
that was kind of what we grappled with was the shock of like, oh wow, this is happening and this is now.
Yeah.
And then almost the what would I call it? You would say completion, but the acknowledgement of the graduation of like, wow, okay, I might not want her to leave her body. She might not want to leave right now. And also being like, well, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And we both knew that it was the next step in her path. And to me, that is what made all the difference. It's interesting because it's not something like doing the TEDx talk or something. You're not really allowed to talk about spiritual things in that way. And there are all these other
Full
reasons
permission
why,
here.
right? Right? Yeah.
Right.
All these other reasons why I was able to, after she had died, respond in a way that felt very connected and joyful and grateful rather than in what we would consider a typical mourning or grief response, which is very different than what I had. But I think one of the number one reasons was definitely that acknowledgement that she has her next steps to take, and I was her partner who was going to support her next steps, no matter what they were. And this happened to be leaving the physical body so that she could take her next steps. And that's that distinction, right? Between like,
Right.
who is she? She's
Right.
in a body, but she's not the body. So, like, she, the spirit, is taking next steps and having her soul's evolution.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it's letting me have my soul's evolution because then I get to do my next steps in my body,
Yeah.
but being impacted by what her path is.
Yeah. And it impacted everyone around her as well. All of her close friends and family got to have an opportunity to take their next steps and to
Mm-hmm.
grow as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she
Mm-hmm.
was and still is so present, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know her
Yeah.
very well. So present in spirit and really visiting everyone and saying hello with her
Mm-hmm.
beautiful laughter and joyousness. Yeah, you were both my introduction to laughter yoga. That was a
Oh,
huge love of mine as well back in the day.
yeah.
It
It's
still
a
is.
while now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have fond memories of the both of you
Mm-hmm.
with all of the laughter and that introduction to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's such an important piece that knowing, having that experience of yourself as the soul
Mm-hmm.
that keeps going, right? The soul that's occupying this temporary body mind, this temporary personality that we get to have, the character that we play on the stage of life that's quite temporary. But knowing yourself as the soul and knowing the other as that soul, death is experienced so much differently. And there can be a recognition of both the loss, the missing of the body personality and the physical presence. You know, she's not there to hold and to laugh with in
Mm-hmm.
person and to, you know, you shared life together, you lived together,
Mm-hmm.
traveled together, worked, laughed, played together. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is that loss, right? And that presence in a different way. And so to be able to be with death, both in acknowledging that human part of the loss, but knowing there's so much more and she keeps going and you keep going. That's that life after death. I want to talk about life
Mm-hmm.
after death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think most of us when we hear life after death, we think of, oh, that's like the afterlife, right? Maybe that mysterious, nebulous bardo space of where does the soul go, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
we die. And of course, every religious tradition and spiritual tradition has its own way of contextualizing that and communicating what that is and different ideas about that. And then so many of us as souls know that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And, you know, it's still hard to put into words, but I think that's what we think about when we think of life after death. But there's also those of us who experience the passing of a loved one. There's what does our life look like
Mm-hmm.
after the loss of a loved one, the life after death, you know, experiencing
Right.
someone else's death, not our own.
Yeah.
So I would love to talk about that more specifically and how your life continued afterwards and what kind of growth experiences you had, you know, talking about
Mm-hmm.
Kate taking her next step with her death and then what that looked like for you and your growth and what you got to learn
Mm-hmm.
from that experience of having
Mm.
one pass.
I think for me, there's so many different layers of it. And again, one of the things I felt like Kate and I both were able to hold space for each other in an interesting way, even though it wasn't her time to hold space for me. I think her perspective
Mhm.
was so clear. It didn't mean there weren't times we both struggled a bit with what was happening,
Yeah.
but there was so much clarity. And one of the pieces, and these are things that I feel like really supported me,
Mhm.
is when she was in her last few weeks, I did some interviews with her, and I still have to find some of the notes, but like some I recorded, some I wrote down, different things. But one of the questions I asked her was people feeling like she might be giving up. Because I think that's often something that happens when someone's diagnosed, is that like she had to make some choices about she was getting blood transfusions and about kind of what steps to take next. And her choices were really clear and I supported them. But when I asked her, kind of saying, like, what would you say to people when they might say you gave up your will to live or you gave up? And she said, I'm choosing life either way.
Yeah.
And to me, that is exactly what you're touching on, is that like she knew as a soul that she wasn't choosing death. She was like, she knew the body would die, but she was choosing life either way. And I feel like that pertains to me too, because I know here I am and I'm choosing life. I'm still on the planet. And yet to remind myself that there's this thread, that there's the continuity of, we used to joke and say it's your lucky lifetime, or like it's our lucky lifetime, because we had a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah.
And then the joke was kind of like there's only one lifetime, and people say, what do they say about one life to live, or you
You only
have
have
one
one
life,
life to live, yeah.
that's all you've got. And we were like, yeah, there's one life, and it is this thread that never ends. And
Yeah.
so it's our lucky lifetime, was like, and we only have one lifetime. And the one lifetime isn't just in this body, like we're reminding each other
Yeah.
of that. And
Yeah.
that's where I can find I get really caught up, is when I think like, oh man, I didn't finish this and I didn't do that yet. Now, how many years do I have left? And I'm very aware of my own mortality in this body, because she had died when she was just turned 42.
Wow.
So, now looking back, we know how incredibly young that is, right? That was
When you're
a very,
42, it might feel young or old. I don't know.
right.
Yeah.
So at the time it felt kind of like both, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm really aware that, friends of mine talk about being at stages in their life that are when they're older than me. So maybe they're in their 60s, 70s and older, my family, how many family or friends are dying. And I feel like, gosh, I've been aware of that for the past many years, that it's not about age. Like we can't
Yeah.
assume that we're going to live a long life.
Yeah.
And in terms of my life, I just feel like part of what Kate taught me was really to let go of the timeline. And I'm not always good at it, for sure. Like, this week's a good example. I'm like, oh, I'm behind in this and this, but it's like, all right,
Right.
we just have to be who we are. And
Yeah.
that was one of the really huge lessons, is how, gosh, I wrote about this in one of my essays a while back. When she was in her dying process, we did Caring Bridge,
Okay.
which is the online network where you share with friends and family kind of the updates on things.
Yeah.
And that was a whole other experience, because it was really helping other people adjust to the idea that she would be leaving her body. And in that was encouraging people to write to her and to express to her and to have communications.
Yeah.
So, as one would expect, a lot of the communications were just these beautiful notes and letters sharing how much she impacted people's lives. And I still remember a few days before she died, her just being in tears. And because I would read her the Caring Bridge, because she wasn't on the computer much.
Yeah.
And she was just in tears saying, like, I just didn't know. I just had no idea. Like, what are you talking about? She's like, I had no idea that I touch people's lives just by being me. And
Yeah.
even still, it makes me kind of teary. It's like,
Yeah.
that is like, she searched for her soul purpose, or her life. I think her human purpose kind of evaded her.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I don't have a career purpose or path, or what do I
Right.
do? And did I miss the boat and all this stuff?
Yeah.
And then she really came into that soul level purpose of, oh, I'm here to be myself,
Yeah.
which is what, teacher Michael always taught us too.
Yeah.
We all have one soul purpose. Everyone has the same soul purpose, and that's to
Yeah.
be who we are.
I
So
know, but we all want the details.
all want to know what that looks like. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
in
she
those
did that
ways,
so well.
that
Yeah.
carries forward for me. If Kate was such a great example of being who we are, impacting other people. And we have no control over, or we don't know what that looks like and how we're remembered, or how we've changed people's lives, or how we've touched people. And I really do try to remember that regularly, of like, all right, I just need to be who I am. And that is my purpose. And I
That's
need to do
enough.
my own practice so that
Yeah.
I can be more of who I am and shed all the other crap that gets in my way of being who I am, like that's the point.
Right.
So, we do it the best we can. Some days
Yeah.
easier than others, but
She did that so well. And I love that you shared that she didn't even recognize it really. She got to receive all
Mhm.
those love letters from people that knew her and cared about her and hear just how much she
Yeah,
impacted them just with her joy, just with her beingness,
that's
just
what they're
by
being.
being herself. I think there's so many of us out there that can relate where we are like the healer that doesn't necessarily have a specific form that that
Yeah.
healing takes. It's just we're showing up in our bright, happy, joyous selves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it can be easy to use those worldly standards to judge ourselves and think, well, I'm not up to much. So,
Right.
I'm
Right.
not
I'm not being productive enough or
right.
creative
It's
enough
not
or putting it.
productivity or,
Yeah.
that it needs to take certain forms that the world can validate and give accolades for and such. And she just shined such a beautiful example of just be yourself. And that's enough. Look
Mhm.
how many lives you touched.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
And
all.
in that, actually, on that thread, after she had died, it was probably the next day, maybe 2 days later, and I was writing her obituary and trying to find the words. And she was very present. Like, even though she kind of shot right out of her body, she just was ready to
Ready to
go
go.
and very conscious. Did a lot of practices to prepare herself for that. When I was writing her obituary, I was thinking of the different things, and she did this and that and did the gardening and the tie-dye and the like all these different things in her life and about her connection to community. And then she really clearly came in and said something like, tell them the most important part of all,
Yeah.
like that I touch people by being myself. Like, and I forget how I worded that, but it was in the
Right.
obituary. Like, and the most important part was that she impacted the world by just being herself. And
Yeah.
that was her in spirit sharing that afterwards. Like, don't forget to tell people this. All the rest of the things
Yes.
you're writing don't matter at all,
That's the
actually.
takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. I love that. She comes through so clearly. She came and visited since she knew we were getting together.
Oh, yay.
Yeah,
Nice.
this morning I got a hello. I
Nice.
love that. So then life continued for you. And would you say there was a period of time where you were in what people might call a typical grieving period, but it looked different for you? I know it looked different for you. Like, how was that transition for you
Mhm.
from, I don't want to call it the before and after Kate, but like, because she's so with us in spirit.
BK.
But
Yeah.
just the before and after of the physical presence, and then
Mhm.
moving forward in life, having that life continues, right? It's this one continuous thread
Yeah.
woven through many lifetimes.
I would say that I didn't have what people would call a more expected grieving process. I wouldn't even call it a grieving process, honestly. I mean, to me, I definitely have a little bit of a thing about the idea of a grieving process still uses the word grieving in it. And to
Yeah,
me, it really boxes us in quite a bit
right.
because really it's a response to death
Yeah,
process. But we have this umbrella term that's pretty new. It's like from the late 60s, early 70s, really, that we started talking about a grieving process psychologically. So for me, there was so much connection and so much gratitude. Kate also had her actual death, physical death itself, was really powerful for me and very
mm,
profound.
mm,
And in a way that some people, I've heard some other people express, where just the room was filled with bliss, like nothing but bliss and joy. And I was in a high state of gratitude that I got to experience that and
yeah.
participate in that. And masters showed up. And I mean, it was amazing. I had actually, even with my spiritual training, had never had an experience anything like that.
Wow.
So again, the things you can't talk about, like, in certain
On TED
circles,
Talks.
on TED Talk, but
Yeah.
that was significant. And so to me, it had me on this interesting high. And other people wondered and felt comfortable saying to me, like how, oh, well, eventually, kind of like I'll get bit in the butt on like a disease.
So there was
That,
this expectation that you're going to hit this wall of heavy grief energy. And I know you,
yeah,
I never experienced you going through that, but I think
no,
for you it was more like, how do I explain to people like this is
that was the
actually
hard
my
part.
authentic experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's very well put. That was the challenge of
Yeah.
being able to say, we have this idea that the more you love someone, the more you grieve. And it's one of the concepts that I really try to expand for people
Yeah.
because I'm not saying like, okay, if you're grieving, that can be your expression of love, or it could be because you love someone a lot, but it isn't love. Grief and love to me are not the same thing. And for me, it was the love was so deep, and we had the good fortune of having that similar spiritual perception and path and practice,
And awareness.
that it was like that level of love
Mm.
truly carried me through. I mean, it's still one of the deepest spiritual experiences of my life,
Yeah.
really is that knowing that the love continues
Yeah.
to, instead of being the grief, being in place of grief. So it's
Yeah.
like the more we love someone doesn't mean the more we grieve.
Right.
It's
Depends on
there's not a
our
ratio,
right.
of
I think
like,
it depends on our understanding and experience of love. I think it's more grief is when we have that attachment, right? When love is a little bit muddied with the concept or the experience of attachment. And so then the loss is pretty severe because
right.
we're holding on
Yeah,
to that experience of the physical presence and all of the experiences we
right,
had in the past with that person and who we are in
right.
relationship. It's a lot of identity loss too. So there's
Yeah.
so much that grief is really the experience of loss.
It is, and it's yes, and I
But
think it is
not of
the
love.
attachment. But not, and I do think that it is attachment. To me, grief
Yeah.
is, if in a spiritual way, I would,
Mhm.
well, even I guess emotionally, that grief is really this adverse response to the temporary nature of physical life.
Yeah.
Like we have physical life, we are in these temporary bodies, we're surrounded by a temporary world, and we have this adverse reaction to it that
Yeah.
feels like
Yeah.
it's like we don't like it, like we
Yeah.
wish it
And
was
it's
different.
natural, like bodies grieve, but if I think the more that you are being that soul self and just really centered in the infinite beingness of spirit, the less that death and loss is experienced as grief and the more it's experienced
Hmm.
as joy. And I think that's a difficult concept for most people, and yet I want to put it out
Yeah.
there.
No, I think it's important just to expand. And the thing is, it's
Yeah.
not to say that anything's wrong with people's process. And I think that sometimes can be the misinterpretation that like
Right.
we're not, I'm not saying that people shouldn't grieve or shouldn't feel sad or shouldn't feel heartbroken. Like that's not it. But it is the acknowledgement, as you just said, of that we're bodies grieving bodies,
Yeah.
and there is a loss and there is a visceral response of
Yeah.
adjustment, and that person is physically not there. But
Yeah.
then the question becomes, there's a real loss physically, but then is there a perception that the loss is every aspect of them? And
Right.
that's where you talk about life after death. It's like, well, something animates who we are. I don't
Right.
care if people call it spirit or soul or consciousness or whatever word, but the something animates us.
Yeah.
And when our body dies, that something isn't in the body anymore.
Yeah.
And where did it go? And we can have
Yeah.
different beliefs on that, or I think for you and I, different knowing about that. Because I do feel like because we have had personal experiences of that connection to spirit, it makes it easier because then we know that something carries on, that life continues, whatever that looks
Yeah.
like.
And we experience that continuity of life rather than
Yeah.
that loss.
Right. Yeah. And that connection. These are the pieces where I think that no matter how spiritual people are or how spiritually inclined they are, and I know that can look a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
I do think that the secular ideas in our Western culture of like, we think life is the opposite of death. There's life and death. And like, well, we know there's birth and death,
Right.
and relationships end, like death ends a relationship. Well,
Right.
we know that death continues after a relationship, or
Yeah.
that death is really a neutral, it's genuinely the process of death, like you've mentioned, that really being able to accept death as part of the cycle of life,
Yeah.
that death is neutral. And I say neutral meaning we all are going to lose these bodies,
Yeah.
or we're going to leave these bodies.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's like it's not tragic or a horrible thing that we die. However, the circumstances can be tragic and the
Yes.
situations can be really like heartbreaking and awful. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that death itself, the fact that our bodies will die,
Yeah.
is tragic. So it's like we put these labels on as just as humans of what's good and what's bad. And so the more we can really see that more clearly for what it is, I
Yeah.
think the more easily we can adapt and adjust and even embrace death as a real spiritual, I don't know, happening, I guess, a spiritual event in our lives, but
Yeah.
also part of the spiritual adventure. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's always going to be easy or it's, we're both like, can be joyful and smiling about it. But I think it's because what happens for us, I think, and tell me if this is true for you. For me, talking about death, I get like strangely excited because it reminds me so deeply of our spiritual nature.
Yes.
And so there's this excitement of like, oh, right, I'm a spiritual being. And I
Right.
don't remember that every second of the
Right.
day. Like,
And you'll
definitely.
really get to know that when you die.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, there are
It'll
the
be
hard
very
parts.
apparent.
It will
Yes,
be
I
very
love that.
apparent to, I don't know, like, will it be apparent to us or not? You hear different stories about
Right.
people who have left their bodies and then they're saying, like, what is it, Danny and Brinkley and some of his talks in his books, who had had near-death experiences of being like, people are like, he's gone. And he says, what do you mean I'm gone? I'm right
Yeah.
here. But he's not in his body.
That's so funny.
So,
So yeah, he didn't realize he had died. Yeah, when you said that about getting excited, to talk about death and dying, I thought too, when you shared that your experience with Kate's actual death process, how just immensely, I can't even put words to it because I was really experiencing it when you described it, but it just sounds like just such a potent presence of spirit, such a high vibration of awareness. And that's super unique. And I think that would give anybody who had that experience a much different, reference point for death because that
mhm,
was such a positive, amazing, life altering, expansive experience. Whereas
mhm.
I think most folks probably experience death in a different way, and not everybody passes with that much, you know,
True.
joy and awareness. There's much
Yeah.
more often a lot of fear surrounding the event or just that attachment. When we live our lives identified as these bodies, death is going to be a horrible
Yeah.
experience because it's the end, right?
Right. Exactly.
Game over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I
This
mean,
is like,
in so many cultures around and religious practices and spiritual traditions around the world, it's like the focus has been, especially Eastern traditions, has
yeah,
been on like how do you support the soul or the spirit or the continuation of or whatever again we call that.
yeah,
How do you support that if you're someone who's still in a body? And in Western culture, it's about us more. And we are an individualistic culture
yeah. We
as
make
time
it
has
about
gone by.
ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah, so there is a place where I think it's the focus in the US and other Western countries is very much on like, what is my personal experience? What is my loss? What is my sadness? Because we're identified with the body. And in these other cultures, it's like identified with the person's
yeah. Soul
being, the
essence.
spirit
Yeah,
who's died and trying to support them to the next life.
right.
So that's a huge loss. Like there is such a gap there. And I
Yeah,
think that it creates a lot of struggle. And I think I was mentioning earlier, and I maybe didn't finish this thought about even if people are spiritually focused or inclined, these secular ideas or these body focused worldly ideas that are embedded in our society kind of take precedent or are really dominant.
yeah,
And then people think like, gosh, I know life continues after death, or I know there's an afterlife, or I
yeah,
really believe this, or I've experienced it. Why am
yeah,
I still so sad? And it's like, well, there's the body to body adaptation we need to go through, but
yeah,
there's also a lot of messaging we're bombarded with
yeah,
constantly that somehow sometimes override our own spiritual knowingness and certainty.
right,
So, and I think that's where spiritual practice for ourselves comes in. So it's like, okay, if I can remember that I'm a spirit in a body,
right.
then that should help me remember that the person who died is a spirit no longer in a body,
Right.
or vice versa, or like somebody we love dies, and if we can see that they are a spirit in a body, or
Yeah,
spirit now without a body, if we can see them as a soul, we can remember that we're a soul.
yeah.
And so there is an important play between the two that I think it's overlooked. And
Yeah.
that's part of why I love talking about it too,
Yeah,
because,
it's like, hey, death is talking about spirit, really.
yeah, it is. It is. I
Yeah.
think for us it is, at least. I know
Right.
it's
I
not for
get
everyone,
excited
but
about it too.
Yeah.
But there's a vast array of experiences with it, like you said. But I love that you brought attention to just what we can, anyone, what we can learn from the process. What can we be reminded of? And how can we just approach it from that more spiritual perspective, regardless of
Mhm.
whether that's a certain religious tradition or, but every religious and spiritual tradition around the world has that framing of death as the soul goes on, right? There is an afterlife. Whatever
Mhm.
it's called, there is an
Mhm.
afterlife. And we can prepare for that by living as that soul now.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then our life after death, it doesn't have to be this abrupt ending with a huge sense of now what, right? I think
Right.
that's why I brought up, Jen, how did your life look like afterwards?
Yeah.
Because I think for so many folks there's a period of like, but now what? Like when someone's
Yeah.
entire life and identity and sense of meaning and purpose was so tightly interwoven with a loved one that passed, whether it was
Right.
a child or a partner,
Right.
there can be a sense of like, oh my God, their life ended. So now it feels like my life as I knew it ended. And
Mhm.
it's a time of new beginnings, of course, too. And how can
Yes.
that look? Like, how can you
Yeah.
bring more ease to that transition and more presence, really, to everything you're experiencing,
Mhm.
both as that body self that's grieving and that soul self that just, I love how you framed death as a graduation.
Mhm.
I see
Mhm.
that too, and I think that's so
Yeah.
important to acknowledge, like to be able to celebrate, to both
Mhm.
acknowledge any grief someone's experiencing, but also celebrate like that soul completed their
Yeah.
important life process and mission. Even if on a human level we might judge and say, oh, but they were young or they had so much more to
Mhm.
do, or we might have all of these judgments or concepts that might limit us from being able to celebrate the life, and no matter what the duration of it is, but to just remember like
Mhm. Yeah.
they're completing graduation.
They're completing. Yeah. And that's where if we consider this the Earth School, it doesn't matter what our age is, whether it's a newborn or someone lives to 100. I mean, in the context of millions and millions of years of, like it's a
Right.
very little blip, no matter what. Like,
No matter what.
so we do have those judgments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think kind of how life continued, I think a lot of people end up having no choice except to go back into, a loved one dies and then they're back at work the next week or the next
Yeah.
day or the next month. And so, or they're having families and we didn't have kids. And so there's a lot of things that people have to just kind of pick up, but their lives are changed. Like your
Right.
life is just going to be changed.
Yeah.
And that might end up being internal and not as much external. So I feel like I was in a fortunate position too to be able to look at like what do I want my next steps to be? And this is where part of Kate's exit and her soul's evolution, it was like we still were a team. And we acknowledged that when she was still in her body of like, all right, you're going to help me.
Yeah.
You're not a body, but like we're still a team in terms of what I then am doing in the physical world and her support from a different place energetically, kind of that expanded version
Yeah.
of Kate, so to speak. So
Yeah.
that's when I really started doing more around death and dying work
Yes.
because I really wanted to facilitate conversations because, as you said, like with previous generations, there weren't as many conversations. And I still find now it's growing more and more. I think that there's a certain trend in the past 5 to 10 years where there's death cafes. I've been involved in that movement. And there's other places where people can get together and just talk
Right.
about these topics. So that became really important to me because I could see the value of it during Kate's process with our friends and family. Like being
Yeah.
that open and having these conversations made such a big difference. So it gave me a certain purpose that was still connected to her, and not everyone has a chance to do that. I mean, certainly some people do things around people's legacy, or I do believe that we carry on somehow the qualities of somebody that we would
Yeah.
like to keep bringing forward. And there's all sorts of
Yeah.
ways that we carry them forward in our lives.
Yeah.
But
I
I
love
had the chance to do that in a way that, some people do, some people don't.
yeah.
So it is a real question, like how do you carry on? And to me, that's where it's focusing on someone's presence. I mean, I've done a lot of writing around that, like the absence versus presence. If we're these bodies, we're going to focus on the physical absence.
Right.
And if we can go beyond that, not even spiritually, although I think it's, for me, it is spiritual too, but
Yeah.
if we can focus on someone's presence, whether that's memories, whether that's being able to look at the qualities or what their meaning was in our lives, how they impacted us, all those things, it brings them present.
Yeah.
But the second we go back to the physical body and it no longer being here,
Yeah.
we're going to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's just like being aware of where your focus is in that moment and then getting to choose.
Yeah.
And we think with death, we don't get to choose. It's kind of like we have all these great tools for
Yeah.
well-being. We have all these great spiritual tools. But when it
Yeah.
comes to death, it's like, oh no, there's one way, and that's feeling really sad and grieving.
Right.
It's like, actually, we can grieve and allow that to work through our bodies, but then we still do have choice about where our thoughts are focused. And there is a greater spiritual undercurrent for me, which is like when we're feeling connection,
Yeah.
we can't experience loss. Spiritually, it's impossible. There's
Yeah.
connection and there's separation.
Right.
So if I feel separation, then I'm going to feel the heartache. But when I find any way that I need to be connected to myself, to my own spirit, to the spiritual realms, to Kate's spirit, whomever it is, then the loss, even if it's for a few seconds, the loss has to go away. Like it's just spiritually has
Yeah.
to go away. And I think that that's been a huge part of how I have navigated
Yeah.
this and other deaths in my life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've been such a great teacher of that. Like you get to choose to be aware of where your mind is going. Is your mind going
Mhm.
into the identity of being a body and no longer having their physical presence? Or are you directing your mind, because you get to be the
Right,
director,
right.
into remembering, oh yeah, there she is. She's still going on as spirit and she's graduated from
Mhm.
this particular lifetime. I love that you pointed out, because this is a really important piece that we all can relate to, no matter what spiritual or religious path we identify with. The fact that everyone lives on through their loved ones, right? Their
Mm,
gifts that they gave in their lifetime, whether that was their joy or their beauty, just all of the ways that we think about that person when they're gone, they live on through us, everything that they left with us.
yeah.
And I think that's an important hello, that we get to remember the beauty, right? It's focusing on what still lives on.
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah, and I think I like to call it that what lives on or that which never dies is also
yeah,
like really strong in me of
yeah.
like what does live on, what doesn't die. I mean, even kind of on a neuroscience perspective, it's like
Mhm.
by having a relationship with someone and a connection to someone, they're impacted inside of our brains. If you want to get really physical, like that kind of
Right,
stuff blows me away. We
right.
can't forget them in terms of like they're physically a part of our makeup now at some level, and just the fascination with that. And I think sometimes people are afraid that like if I stop feeling the grief or the sadness, or if I'm not missing the person in a
Mhm.
heavier way, it means that they'll go away or my connection will disappear or the closeness won't be there. So we kind of rely upon missing someone
Mhm.
as a way to be close to them. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, 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 it's fine if you miss someone and you feel the sadness, but like
Yeah.
it's not the only way to connection or to closeness. There's
Right.
actually other ways to get there. And, we can let go of that loss, but that doesn't mean we're letting go of our loved one in the process.
Yeah. They can live
Yeah,
on through us.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, we can carry those torches, so to speak.
Yeah.
All the light that they shared. I love that.
Yeah.
So you were very involved, as far as I remember, in the death cafes, right? Death and
Mhm.
dying. Talk to us about that. Some people might not have heard of
Oh,
Death
sure.
Cafe, but whether folks have heard of a death cafe or not, tell us, what is a death cafe, and how does that support communities who are experiencing death and dying, or who just want to face that topic before it's already in their face,
Hmm.
right?
Right. Yeah, ahead of time. It was this movement that started, I think, in around 2011 in the UK. And basically, it's groups of people, and they're usually death cafes. They have facilitators of the groups, but
Yeah.
people get together with no agenda. There's no religious agenda, spiritual agenda, political agenda. You just get together and talk about death. So, and eat snacks. That's the cafe. You eat like
Yeah,
treats.
it's
And it's
important.
one of the threads that's very important is, you're eating cupcakes and drinking tea and
Yeah, it's very
basically,
British.
yeah, it's very British,
That's
talking
good
about
thinking.
death. And so, and they're all there's no charge, they're all nonprofits. So like sometimes people will collect money to pay for the actual space or the treats and things, but it's just a volunteer thing where people volunteer to facilitate and people show up. So I
Yeah.
used to do them in Ashland, Oregon, and now I'm in Vermont, but there are a number of death cafes going on here as well. And I think the most important part is that there's no agenda. So people get to come in not as a grief support circle, though they can
Mhm.
bring their grief if
Yeah.
they are feeling that, and just get to talk openly and have people share and listen on any topic related to death. And
Yeah.
to me, the important part is to break through the taboo
Yes.
of talking about death. And people leave, even people who are nervous who come, who maybe it's their first time coming. I feel like almost everyone in any group I've ever been a part of has said like, "Oh, I feel so much better
Yeah.
after talking," or like, "I'm going to go talk to my family now." And
Yeah.
it's like the conversation can open up so that people can be more comfortable.
Yeah.
So it's cool. So if people look up Death Cafe, it's
Yeah.
probably deathcafe.org or .com. It will
Mm.
show many of the places around the world who are hosting them, or just put
Yeah.
your community, the name of your town or city in the computer, and it should tell you if there's any going on. So
Nice.
yeah, highly recommend. It's a
Yeah.
good starting spot for people.
Now we want to look up if there's one
There's
here in
probably one in
Oregon.
Bend. I would think
Yeah,
so.
it's gotta be.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so important because I'm thinking too of just like the practical and logistical experiences around death. Like that's something you've facilitated before too, right? Because so many of
Mhm.
us, like all of a sudden, maybe an elderly parent dies or a
Yeah.
relative, and you're not only dealing with whatever, grieving process might be happening or the shock if it was a sudden loss, but also now you've got these practical things to deal with.
Yeah.
There's are you cremating? Are you like all of those physical level things added to
Mhm.
whatever emotional things are happening? That can be a big deal. And is it true that death cafes there's also access to that kind of information, just kind of the plan ahead, like
Yeah, well, sometimes
all
people
the
just bring that
logistics.
stuff up. Someone might just say, how do I do an advanced directive
Right.
for my loved ones, or how do I do this kind of thing? And because death cafes don't promote things, they're not going to usually have specific resources there because they really wanted a space where nothing specific is promoted.
Yeah, that's
And there's
true.
so many different beliefs around, like kind of death rituals and different
Okay.
things. But usually people there will have plenty of resources if you just ask around,
Right.
or the people who are organizing it and
Yeah.
facilitating that kind of
Generally, if
thing.
they're facilitating, they probably experienced it enough
Yes.
to know what their own, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the reason to talk about this topic and think about it beforehand too, is so that you're not stuck in the space of like, what am I going to do? What are the physical, practical things I need to do? And meanwhile, you're having to deal with the emotional, spiritual impact
Yeah.
all at once. So I mean, I really do encourage people to kind of get those ducks in a row to some extent, have the conversations, because I do feel like it creates more and more ease when you're in the situation itself, or if something suddenly happens and all that,
Yeah.
because you'll have enough to deal with,
Right.
So,
If you've at least got
yeah.
some plan or idea ahead of time, that's
Hmm.
one less thing to have to manage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good to know that that exists. I haven't visited one, but I would like to, just to
Oh,
see.
you would enjoy it, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think my hesitation is always like, is it okay to like? I tend to laugh, and so
Well, I mean, I
Are we
think that's
laughing
some
at
of
it?
it. Yeah, like you get to do that and you get to express yourself in that kind of way.
Yeah,
And it would, I think it's good then people can hear where that comes from for you even, or
yeah,
like what that lightness is. But honestly, in groups, and it's when I've done it, it's been maybe 5 people to 8 people or 10 people in a small group or multiple groups.
yeah.
And that's one of the things people are surprised about the most, is how much laughter actually ends up happening. And, it's not like we're laughing at death. That's not
Right,
what it is, but that there is like, that's the life continuing that you
right.
mentioned. Like
Yeah,
life continues on. Here we are. We can be very serious and feel what we feel, and we can have the laughter and the joy and know that, all right, even if it is laughing at ourselves,
I mean, it's really kind of funny to think about. We are all going to die, and it's this taboo subject that nobody really wants to talk about until it's right there.
Right.
Obviously, some
Right.
people
Yeah.
do. Here we are, but
I know. And people say,
that in
there's
itself is funny.
right. And it's true. It's true. Like we all
Yeah.
have a terminal illness and it's called birth. It's
Yeah.
like, yep, that's exactly right. Like I don't remember who quoted, the people have said that. And I just think that's so
That's
true.
a
Like
great
we
quote.
do all have a terminal diagnosis, every single one of us from the moment that we were born in the body.
Yeah. I love that.
So,
That's hilarious.
yeah.
Well, and just like
Um,
the silliness of being a human in general, all that stuff comes up when you look at the fact that it ends.
it's true.
The physical life,
I know. You
all of
kind
the
of
ways
hope.
that we take ourselves so
Yes.
seriously. You have to stop taking yourself seriously when you look at death.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
mean, you
Like you
gotta
brought it
hope
up
that it'll lighten
before.
us up a little, right?
Yeah, it
Like,
lightens
and
it up.
it's
You brought it up before with looking at like all the things you want to accomplish in life, right? Like we all might have this sense of like drive and purpose that I want to make sure I do this or that or complete this or share this, And when you look at death, you have to look at the fact that this human self ends and it just brings up, oh, I'm taking this so seriously.
yeah. And this is helpful for me. It's not like I don't take things seriously. I feel grateful for this conversation because it's a reminder
Yes.
to myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
there were a number of years that I did a workshop called Laughing Matters, and then the subtitle
Yeah.
was What Laughter Teaches Us About Living and Dying.
Nice.
And I do believe that that's where like the laughter and the tool of that does help us let go in the same way that
Yeah.
we're confronted with letting go when it comes to death or lightening up or being
Yeah.
able to take things less seriously or be less attached or in our minds of trying to, it's also personal and it's so serious. And, there are real things. People have real struggles and
Yeah.
there's real suffering in the world in terms of usually the material basic needs
Yes.
being met. It's like, how do we balance all that, but still remember, we still are all going to die. And what
Yeah.
I wish for people is it's like just to make peace with that because we
Yeah.
can't all have a peaceful, amazing death. That's not what all of us have decided on a soul level. And so it's just make peace with the fact that we are mortal here, at least right
Yeah.
here. So,
Yeah, when you can make peace with death before you die, you can really fully live because there's one
mhm.
less thing to be afraid of.
Right. It's a big one, it's
That's a big
huge.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
fear of death it's a huge elephant in the room most of the time. That
Mhm.
if we avoid it, we don't fully allow ourselves to live because that fear covers everything, right? If there's a fear of
Yeah.
one thing, it carries over.
I think most people are actually more afraid of pain and suffering, that
Yeah,
death will bring them pain, physical
right.
pain or suffering, than they are afraid of death to some extent. Not
Yeah,
everyone. I mean, I think there is a valid fear of death and not being here and what does that mean and where do we go and all that.
right.
But that otherwise, I think people tend to be more afraid of losing a loved one. And
Yeah,
that's where this conversation being like, all right, so how can we actually reframe it for ourselves now
yeah.
so that there isn't as much fear or so we can have a different experience?
Yeah, to fully be
But
present with those we love.
yeah.
Yeah, I think if we're afraid of
Yep.
someone dying, we're not going to fully be present with them when we're here. That fear creates a
Mhm.
barrier because then you're focused on the body, really. Right?
Right.
It brings me back to if there's that resistance or fear of death, it's about what am I going to lose? Or like you said, the pain. There is a lot of pain or suffering associated with death because obviously, for many folks, the process is long and drawn out and super
Mhm.
painful and uncomfortable. So there's that too. But the more that
Mhm.
we can let go of all of the fear surrounding death, whether it's of ourselves or a loved one, the more we can really show
Mhm.
up
Yeah,
as.
and all the more reason to learn spiritual tools.
Yeah. I know.
I mean,
This is
really,
where we're
right?
plugging spiritual tools.
And I'm not even like, I don't, yeah, it's like, it is like when I
Yeah.
really think about when people ask me, like, what really was supportive to you, it
Mhm.
was laughter yoga was huge,
Yeah.
but having spiritual tools.
Yeah.
Number one, having the tools. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's kind of, it does feel like a plug, but it's not like, it's not intended
Yeah.
to be a
It's
plug.
just
It's
like
just
this
like
was your experience.
the
Yeah.
reality of
Yeah.
how important the tools are and what an impact they can make because I do have a real certainty and a belief that we are energetic beings, like we are energy. And so we get to manage that,
Yeah.
in ways that are supportive of us or in ways that aren't.
Yeah. It
So,
makes me think of just how many spiritual practices out there, maybe more in the Eastern tradition, are
hmm.
really all about learning to die, right? That
Totally. Yeah.
even the tools that we've learned that we practice, and Michael Tamura, our teacher, often said that, like, we're just learning to
Yep.
die here.
It's true. I really believe it's true.
Yeah.
And I think
And
to your point earlier with even like that, our identities, like when someone that we love or is very close to us dies,
Mhm.
we are also dying because our identity or whatever's wrapped up in that, there's all sorts of ways that the ego is going to be challenged
Yes.
to let go more and more and more and
Yes.
more and loosen its grip, So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That really is the difference between how you experience death is, are you spirit or are you the ego? If we're gonna distill it down, because really
Yeah.
just, yeah, the
Yeah.
ego's
And are
having
we in
a
the
hard time.
separation and feel isolated in
Yeah.
our ego and in our bodies, or do we feel the connection to
Yeah.
something greater? Yeah.
Yeah, and allowing. It's because in that process, you're not denying that there's an ego. You're just not
Mhm.
being that, right? You're giving the ego
Yeah.
space to be what it is. It's going to have grief, but if you're not
Right.
being that, you're experiencing so much joy and
Yeah.
inspiration too. Like, I find that Kate was a super inspiring soul.
Hmm.
Like, coming back to how it was recognized by all of her loved ones, just how much she gave them just in being herself.
Hmm.
And so then when someone like that dies, we're inspired to
Hmm.
be more like them, like more like all of the
Yeah. And
qualities
more.
that they
Yeah.
were displaying, the joy and the beauty and the connection. She was such a
Right.
beautiful
Yeah.
example of love in the community, bringing people together and
Definitely.
creating community.
Yeah. There's one more thing I just wanted to say that something you said reminded me of, and it's when people ask or have said how do you know what happens after death? Like in some ways we can't know. In other ways, we've had firsthand experiences of spirit and of energy continuing and that kind of thing. But when I think about that for myself, like, well, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
What if spirit doesn't exist? Or what if and then you know what? My answer is like, I don't care. I'd rather be totally wrong. Like I would
Yeah.
rather in this body have
Yeah.
that strong knowingness of spirit.
Yeah.
And so it's like I don't actually I don't need proof of it because it's such a strong knowingness inside of me, but then
Yeah.
it inspires me or it inspires my life to be bigger than it is and it offers me perspectives that I wouldn't otherwise have,
Yeah.
and that makes for a more joyful life
Yeah.
regardless. So I kind
Yeah.
of feel like I can't prove it to anyone else,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really
Exactly.
matter. Like it's that's not the point. The point
Yeah.
is like we get to go inside
And know
and really
ourselves.
know ourselves, yeah, and look at it for ourselves. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, what we just want other people to do too.
Absolutely. It always comes back to know thyself.
Myself.
When
Yeah.
you know yourself, you know, in a sense, what death will be like. I mean, nobody knows exactly beforehand
Mhm.
what the experience is, just like you don't know exactly what you'll experience when you walk into the next room.
Hmm. No, you
But
don't
when you know
really.
yourself, you'll
Yeah.
still be yourself
Hmm.
on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And that's why so many, coming back to my thought about so many spiritual traditions, especially of the Eastern variety, are really teaching practicing for death,
Hmm.
before you die, because it is the same thing. It's really just knowing yourself and knowing
Hmm.
how to let go.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's great to learn that before you die, because if you can let go
Yep.
during your lifetime here, your lifetime,
Impermanence.
yes, your lifetime here will be much more joyous and easeful when you can learn to let go, and
Yeah.
thus dying and death will be as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all get to
Mm.
learn about impermanence here.
No, and honestly, it's like because of my knowingness around spirit in my life, death is actually oddly the easiest for me.
Right?
There are other losses, physical losses that I find really challenging. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
harder when relationships end when both people are still living, or like leaving a house I loved, really hard. But when it comes to, I'm seriously like hard. That
Yeah.
kind of letting,
Yeah.
I've definitely not mastered that at
We
all.
all have areas we have more
Yeah,
attachment to, for
for
sure.
some reason
Yeah.
because I can continue that connection
Yeah.
when someone dies in a way I don't feel like I can when it's not death. It makes
Yeah.
death easier.
Yeah. No,
So
I can see
for
that.
what it's worth, yeah.
Yeah, I can
So yeah, I'm
understand.
definitely not It's
Yeah.
definitely not easy to just let go of it all and to live in this
Right.
temporary world
I know. There's
otherwise.
some things I get really
So,
attached to too. Random things
yeah.
like socks. Like, oh no, those socks got a
Oh,
hole in them.
socks for sure. Yep.
Man, I really liked those.
Yeah, I'm with you on socks.
I know. Couldn't they just
Yeah.
all like magically never get holes in them? And
Yeah. Well, there you go.
yes, we do all
Mm.
have our attachments. There's one more thing I wanted to bring up. What is the Tibetan Book of the Dead called? Is it just called the Tibetan Book of the Dead?
It is. It is. I can tell you the Tibetan name because I actually was just looking at that, but it's, yeah, in English it would be the Tibetan Book of the
Yeah,
Dead.
that's what I was referring to about there's so many Eastern traditions that talk
Mm.
about practicing for dying and what does that look like? Putting words to what the soul's experience is in
Hmm.
what we could call the afterlife or after the body dies. And there's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's others, but I think all of these are written through souls that have retained the memory and experience of that, right? Because as souls, we retain memory too. It's just that most of us don't incarnate with all that memory. Fully
Right.
intact. But to know that there are books out there written that address, the life after death in terms of
Yes.
the soul's experience after death. And I think those are
Yeah.
really helpful and fascinating, whether it's to kind of spark that memory in yourself or just kind of consider, that's a possibility or
The
that's
possibility.
an interesting
Yeah.
thing to think about.
Yeah.
I
And to
mean,
me,
it's
it's for
just
holding
one
it.
soul's trying to put it into words. I think it's
Exact.
something that
Yes.
like spirit, as soon as you try to put it into words, it's not what it is anymore,
Mm.
but it's a fun thing to kind of point at and look at and
Yeah.
just introduce into your awareness before
Yeah.
you're dying or before your loved one's passing to know that there is that space you get to navigate.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think for me, it's like about holding it kind of loosely because we can read, the difference between the Tibetan Book of the Dead versus like a Christian perspective of heaven and hell, let's
Yeah.
say. Like there's pros and cons to all sorts of perspectives on
Yeah.
what happens.
Right, right, right.
So I think it
Yeah.
can be a little slippery. And I
Right.
think it's like if we're reading certain things, just to remember, like there are all these different perspectives, and then we get to integrate them and choose what really resonates and lines
Yeah.
up for us.
Yeah.
And it allows us a chance to question maybe what we were raised
Right.
with or what we used to believe. And maybe we want to shift our beliefs in a way that might be more supportive. So to me, it's
Right.
kind of like, how can we find ways that people have talked about what happens when we die or the afterlife that are actually supportive to
Yeah.
us?
Yes.
Because that's going to be mixed depending on our
Yeah.
background
It's going to
or
be different for different people.
really
And
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's so important. I love how you said it to take, did you say read it loosely?
I hold it loosely. Yeah, yeah, just to
Yeah,
hold all that
to
loosely.
just be
It's
with it and it's like, oh, that's a consideration. Like it kind of broadens the horizons in your own mind so that you're not just slamming up against a certain wall of belief that maybe actually doesn't resonate with you. You can kind of open up that perspective in your mind and consider
mm,
all the possibilities and like you
mm.
said, see what resonates and
Yeah, and in that same regard, even I've been writing about this recently of certain cultures, like Western cultures, been more focused on wearing black as the traditional color of mourning. And then other traditions, mostly Eastern, focus on wearing white as the color of
isn't that
mourning.
interesting
Like,
how opposite
how could
East
you
and
be
West
any
are?
different? Right. And there's like red and there's yellows and there's these
Yeah.
ideas of it, or
Yeah.
like that certain languages don't have a word that is the equivalent of English, the English word for grief. Like
Wow.
just knowing those things to me helps me broaden it out and
Yeah.
remembering like, all right, there's not one story, there's not one way, there's not
Yeah.
one thing, and they all have different purposes. I mean, I
Yeah.
do think that following different religious or spiritual practices and traditions can be incredibly supportive to one's soul's evolution.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone
Exactly.
who's followed one way. I've more integrated different
Yeah.
pieces, but yeah, it's wild how different the ideas can be
Right. Yeah,
from the human perspective.
that's
And
fascinating to
yeah.
me. Yeah. I think I tuned into the red today. I
Oh, nice.
was like, we're looking at death and dying, and red's what jumped out at
Oh.
me.
And I always want to wear blue no matter what, but
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
it's true. Like this would be the color I'd prefer around being at a memorial or celebration of life.
That's good to know.
Yeah, the sky. It's like the sky.
Yeah. I love it.
Aw.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Jen,
Aw,
about
thank
death and
you.
dying. Yeah.
So
Such
fun.
an important topic to keep in our awareness.
Mm.
Yes. When we look at death, we really get to look at eternal life.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yes.
right. Yay. Yeah. Yay. Then there's nothing more to say. It's just
Nothing
like,
more to say.
what else is there?
Just sit here and laugh.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much. And I also want to sprinkle in this for anyone's awareness. I heard that you were writing a book. You are in the process of writing a
Mm,
book about this. So that
I
to me is
am.
very exciting. I'm excited to see your perspective on death and dying out in the
Thank
world and
you.
anything you have to share about it because it's such an important part of what you bring to the world is that
Mm-hmm.
unique and beautiful perspective and awareness on it. So
Aw. Thank you, Jean. Yeah,
forward
it's
to
been a
that.
long time coming, and I'm
Yes.
excited to slowly be wrapping it up. So thanks. Yeah.
Yay. Well, I can be your spiritual cheerleader for that. I know.
Okay. Sounds good.
Even spiritual cheerleaders need spiritual
Yeah,
cheerleaders.
it's true. Amen to that. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone, for joining us today on The Higher Vibe. We will see you next time. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Share this with friends. Really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.